turnover, etc. Prior to this, he joined SBI Capital Markets in 2001, where he worked in structured finance and business development and managed some of the very early day collateralized loan obligations, asset-backed and mortgage-backed securitization deals. He also originated various IPO, M&A, infrastructure advisory and project finance transactions for SBI Capital Markets from private sector clients. He has also had stints with Ramco Systems and Citicorp Information Technologies and L&D, where he spent 6 years in treasury, project finance and corporate finance and was associated with very early infrastructure project finance deals. He is an MBA from TAPI's class of 93. The next speaker we have is Vedavyas Rao. He is a mechanical engineer from Mysore University. He worked as an engineer both in production as well as consultancy roles. He did his PhD in finance from ICFAI Business School. He worked in L&T Finance for 3 years, handling power project development and road projects. He worked with SBI Capital Markets for 3 years in Mumbai in the project advisory and structured finance group. He worked in power advisory in ICRA, that is a ratings agency, for 1 year. Later he joined SBI Caps Bangalore. Presently he is a vice president at SBI Capital Markets. He has handled projects in power sector, both conventional and non-conventional, road and port, both from a funding and advisory perspective. He has also worked in projects in other industry groups like textiles, hospitality and steel. I invite Vedavyas Rao to come up on the stage.
What I thought was instead of discussing back and forth, each panelist can probably make a presentation on his own perspectives, experiences, relating to the topic. And then when everybody is through, we can probably add to what others said and then leave the floor open for question and answer from the audience. I hope this is fine. Yeah. Okay. So probably we can start with Mr. Ramakrishnan.
Fellow speakers on stage, Professor Vishwanath and students of TAPI and professors of TAPI. Good afternoon to all of you. It's probably one of the apt topics to discuss at this time and in the current context. I'll probably weave some of the threads which we had discussed in the morning session for the benefit of the larger audience. I'll just probably highlight a few things in terms of how our capital markets has grown and what needs to be done to take it to the next growth trajectory over the next decade. I'll just make it crisp. There are a few things which I would like to highlight. One is in terms of regulations, which Professor Vishwanath had highlighted. There are 3-4 key milestones in that. One is the SEBI Act of 1992, which resulted in SEBI taking the form and shape which we all know it's doing today. So, be it in terms of protecting the investor interests, promoting growth in capital markets, coming up with regulations, carrying out executive as well as legislative powers vested on it. So that's one key element in terms of, and more importantly, addressing the systemic risks which were prevailing prior to the onset of SEBI in '88. So that is one key milestone. The subsequent key milestone which I would like to highlight is the onset of, as in the inception of NSE. Which is something again we touched upon in the morning, which started operations around '94. I mean, we all are aware of and exposed to what BSE is doing because that's the exchange which hogs the limelight. But post the scam in 92 and the regulatory amendments in around the same time, as in NSE, the idea of NSE was mooted and a demutualized exchange came into being. So that was again another critical milestone, and in fact, BSE was forced to move from the open outcry flow-based trading to an electronic trading in 97. So that's again another key milestone which I would like to highlight. The third milestone is the opening up to FIIs in 93. So that's again, I think liberalization is just one, one aspect which created a domino effect of a whole host of positives to be derived out of. But as in, it's important to note each of these intermediate significant milestones because these define as a whole the growth in the capital markets industry. So opening up to FIIs in 93 with the amendment on the regulation, as well as opening up of our asset management and mutual fund to private and foreign players in 93, that's again another critical milestone. So that together would be a key factor which impacted our growth. And a couple of other parameters which I would like to throw light on is, as in the launch of derivatives, as in we didn't start with derivatives on trading on single stocks, but started with index futures in 2000. So that's another key milestone, and we are aware of the growth which the derivative markets have witnessed, both in terms of what Professor Vishwanath had highlighted in terms of proliferation of instruments as well as newer exchanges under tighter regulations coming to the fore. And the last but not the least, as in we all talk about the sophisticated market and technology infrastructure, right? As in a huge transition from, as in the earlier days when transaction processing used to take, as in the end-to-end processing used to take around 20 odd days. I still remember in the earlier days when people used to face the the materialized shares and the transaction costs involved and the processing time involved, to where we are today in terms of sophistication. But the underlying backbone is something which doesn't get the requisite limelight. What we had discussed in the morning in terms of, as in we are all aware of the BSE's Bolt platform, the online trading platform. But the underlying base on which, the foundation on which it's built was thought of a few years back in the last decade. So they came up with this IMSS, which is their surveillance system. So, as in one of the reasons why, as in despite that there have been cases of, there have been scams in the recent past, there have been non-identification, non-timely identification of mishandling, misappropriation, as in manipulation of stock prices, etc. But the surveillance system, which is more predictive in nature, it analyzes, it figures out and looks for patterns and trends in terms of manipulation, in terms of bulk buying, selling, insider trading, potential insider trading, etc. So that is something which is an actor in the background which doesn't get the limelight. So that's another milestone which I would like to highlight. So I think this being the journey, what will define, and in the interest of time, what will define the growth over the next Indian companies, not just in terms of going, as in them going global, but even in the domestic market, the continuous growth which they have been, which they need to continue demonstrating is again going to be critical. So with this, I pass on to Mr. Gurdas.
As I mentioned, Mr. Pai has worked on several mega deals like Hindalco Novelis, Tata Steel, etc. I know him for almost 12 years now. He knew that I'm writing a series of cases on Tata Steel, Hindalco, etc. But he never even mentioned that he is the one who did it. So this is one grouse I always have. So I came to know only now that he is the one who was funding the deal. Yeah. Thanks, bro.
I guess it's a question of client confidentiality, as we all say. No, I mean, Professor Vishwanath has a very valid point to make that in India, the interaction between professionals or corporate houses and institutions is quite limited. I guess that's a valid point, and probably we owe it to the academia or our own institutes in a sense that we go back and share what we are learning. I guess point taken. Wherever it doesn't conflict with client confidentiality, definitely willing to help. I just wanted to leave with 2 or 3 base thoughts on which I would like to deliberate, or would like probably the other speakers also to deliberate. That's more of are we talking about India having survived the 08 financial crisis, or India perceivedly surviving the 2011 crisis? Are we seeing that this is going to continue, or do we see some red herrings in the overall process? That's one question I would like to throw open probably to other speakers as well, because the way we perceive is that it's not going to be a safe journey going forward. I'm sorry to discourage some of the young professionals out here, budding professionals, if I may say so. I'm not discouraging anybody from joining the stream of finance in your coming terms. But the point to make is that India is increasingly part of the global capital markets. It's probably even statistically one can analyze. The last time I looked at the statistics, more than 50% of equity money on issuances made by Indian companies was coming from overseas. If you include the IPOs, the kind of FII participation in IPOs, the FCCBs, which was a very popular instrument in certain points in time in the last decade, or the QIP placements that happen, or ADRs and GDRs, which are slowly losing sheen thanks to the effective steps SEBI has taken through introduction of QIP route. Even on the debt capital market side, for example, this year, about 15 transactions have taken place in international bonds, aggregating more than $10 billion. If you compare that with the domestic debt markets, debt capital markets, I'm referring to, not the loan market side, but the capital market side, the NCD on bond market. If you put together all the institution as well as PSU placements and private sector corporate placements, I guess the international contribution to the overall fundraising efforts of Indian entities probably is working out to be more than 35-40%. So the importance of international investor in the Indian context is it's only going up. There are arbitrages in terms of cost of funding for Indian companies, maybe arbitrages in terms of valuation potential by placing money, placing equity also with external investors or private equity funds internationally. So Indian entrepreneur has understood the importance of international capital markets. So when we talk about Indian capital markets and the decade ahead, probably this is one thing which we need to keep in mind very carefully. And it's also important from the fact that growing dependence on the international investors would only mean you need to be willing to withstand those jerks or knee-jerk reactions of international investors, because they come with a different mindset, right? They may not be here to stay in the strict sense, despite the advertisements which some people make, right? And that has impacted the fundraising plans or expansion plans or acquisition plans of many a corporate. There are many people at this point in time who are actively looking at potential acquisition opportunities which are holding back, primarily because they don't want to take a chance on how the capital markets will react. Will they be able to refinance the acquisition finance that they put together in a hurry? And maybe even banks like us are not anymore freely willing to look at transactions which are not very, very justifiable, right? So that's one thought I wanted to leave. Second one is probably also Manoj could deliberate on that a little more. Is are we still living in a world of many barriers, as in the kind of tax barriers that we have? If I may just give an example of Professor Vishwanath was mentioning about IDRs as a new thing which has happened. But in this entire last 5 or 6 years since the IDR policy was announced by SEBI, I guess we have seen only one here to stay bank issue the IDRs, right? We have not seen any other international corporation or anybody wanting to raise money from Indian markets despite the perception that Indian markets offer a better PE multiple. So one of the reasons for that is, of course, from an Indian investor's point of view, he's taking two risks. He is taking an exchange rate risk of the base stock on which he is investing, let's say Standard Chartered. The price of IDR in India will vary with the price at which Standard Chartered is quoting in the international market, London. Now, it will have an impact of the Indian price will be a function of how the pound price is moving vis-a-vis rupee. That's one impact. And the second thing that Indian investor will keep in mind is that investing in the IDR doesn't give him the long-term capital gains benefit, unlike investing in, let's say, State Bank of India, which he holds for a year, and if he makes a gain in 1 year, he doesn't have to pay any tax, right? So those kind of gaps which are still there, which are probably not letting the inbound activity in terms of capital markets, so that Indian investors can look at an increased opportunity to look at international exposures for their own portfolios. Thank you.
Okay. Now I pass it on to Mr. Shenoy.
Thank you, Professor. Since the theme of the conclave is post-liberalization and the decade ahead, so before that I would like to take you a few years back. Maybe about 15 years back, when I used to work in Bombay, there was only Indian Airlines. And to fly to Bangalore, you had to know the airport manager who could squeeze you in with some ticket. Unless you have some a strong influence, you would not get a seat on the flight. And once you reach Bangalore, you stay here for 2-3 days, you get the Economic Times. In the same flight, it comes along with you, and then it reaches at 4 o'clock in Bangalore, and it is distributed. And people would read from the first page, first column, till the last page, last column, after 4 o'clock, when everything is over already, markets are closed. So that was prior to liberalization. Today, a fund manager sitting in Bombay and a person sitting in a remotest place in the northeast or any part of the country today has equal access to information on any results, company performances, and things like that. So one good thing that has happened in the last 15-20 years is that the news flows have become equal to everybody. And because of that, I think I was telling somebody in the morning, it's becoming more and more difficult to make money from the capital markets. So as the markets are maturing, which is what is happening today, the markets are matured quite a bit, it becomes more and more difficult. And today, from a situation where 95% of the mutual funds were outperforming the indexes, respective indexes, today 65% of them underperform the respective indexes. Even fund managers are finding it difficult to make money, and it's only going to get tough. So this is the difference, when earlier people used to make money because of so much of gaps in the, information flows and all that. Today, as things become more and more transparent and more easy, it becomes that much more difficult. And also, Indian capital markets, before I speak on that, see, we have close to about 32% of our GDP as savings. Now, if you go back and see what percentage of that gets into the stock markets or equity markets, marginal. It's other way around. In developed countries, almost 70 to 80% of the savings actually go into stock markets or related stuff. Whereas in India, more than 90% gets into fixed income and others, real estate and whatever, and a small percentage of it comes into the capital markets. So there is a huge potential in terms of expanding the markets, expanding the ownership. Like what Gurudas said, today